Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, this is our third annual meeting of the Greater New Haven Labor History Association since the dark days of COVID. Um, so we survived those tough days, and now we're flourishing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization. Um, but I'd like to. Mark? Okay. So my name is Steve Cass. I'm the president of the Greater New Haven Labor History Association and a retired New Haven teacher for 35 years. I was also part of the strike. Um, as my father would say, you've got a big title, president, but you make no money. And he was right. This is a purely volunteer position. Um, and we are all volunteers. We are a nonprofit organization. Um, and so what I wanted to start with was just the agenda. Everybody got an agenda? So we're going to move through this kind of quickly. There's a lot of events I want to keep on time. We're here from 3 to 5. So first off, I'm going to give you a little history of our organization. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the strike from my perspective, a couple of lessons learned. I'm going to show a PowerPoint, which is going to be about 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes, then Frank Carrano, who was the president of the Greater New Haven Teachers Union during that time, will give the keynote. Afterwards, I'm going to present some awards. The panelists will then speak. They'll have about 5 minutes each. And then we'll have some questions and answers. And then we're going to have Frank Panzarella come up, who's normally been our folk singer doing labor songs. And we're actually going to have 3 songs that were the most popular songs during the strike: Union Made, Solidarity Forever, and We Shall Overcome. And I want to note that we have all the words for you. It's going to be a sing-along. And he's going to lead it. He'll be here a little bit. He'll be here a little bit later. I think, I worked with a committee. Pam was part of the committee and one of the leaders of the committee. And during this time, what came up when we talked about the folk songs was we're living during dark times. And people want to congregate and get together. And that's the purpose of the sing-along at the end, is that we want people to come out of here feeling empowered. So I wanted to give you some background information about Greater New Haven Labor History Organization. We were started in 1988 by retired trade unionists, teachers, students, and we've been going since then. So as a nonprofit volunteer organization, membership organization, we're the only labor history organization in the state of Connecticut. So what our mission is: 3 things: educate, celebrate, organize. So to educate about the history, culture, and traditions of working people and their unions; to celebrate, and we're going to be doing that celebration today, individuals and organizations that have improved the quality of life in our community with the Augusta Lewis Troop Pass It On Award. And I'll give you a little bit later some information about Augusta Lewis Troop, who Troop School is named after. The only school in New Haven Public Schools, the Troop, that is named after a teacher. So our vision, in short, is to tell labor's untold story. So as many of you know, union membership has gone drastically down in the U.S. from 1950, 35%, down to now, which is about 8%. At the same time, we all know that income inequality has increased and it's skyrocketed. There is a direct relationship between income inequality and unionization. Let's be clear. The good news is 68% of Americans, according to a Gallup poll, now approve of labor unions in the latest polls. So in response to research that many Americans are uninformed or misinformed about the labor movement, the Greater New Haven Labor History in 2010 initiated and supported legislation in the Connecticut State Legislature. It took 5 years to pass. It was about teaching labor history in the Connecticut public schools, K-12, and that's a big part of our mission. After 5 years in 2015, it was passed. We are only one of 3 states in the nation to have this legislation on the books in Connecticut. So this past year, we did a year-long labor history program at Wilbur Cross. A full year taught by Dario Saltzman. We have 2 major exhibits. One is here in the Labor Center. It's on the garment workers, and we're very close to where thousands of garment factories were set up. This exhibit and panel tell the story. So if you have time later to kind of look through some of the panels, that was a major project of this organization. The other one is the Winchester Project. We put together about 40 panels. It was a traveling exhibit, and now we're trying to locate it at the Winchester plant. So, right now we're in negotiations with the head of Science Park. So we hope to do that and eventually run some tours out of the Winchester plant. The head of Science Park said every day people come in and don't know the history of the Winchester plants. They're asking about it. And then lastly, our archives are housed. We have labor archives since 1988, which are housed at the Dodd Center on the UConn campus for human rights. So that's our organization. So our goal one day is a full-time director and have statewide influence. But here's the big but, we need your help. What we're asking for is people to become members of our organization. $25 costs now $25 for a small pizza at Modern. $25 is not that much these days. And what we have, unfortunately, our website is down at this point, but we have some applications that you can fill out a little bit later. All right, so that's it about the organization. Now I'd like to switch gears, what we're here for. And I want to begin our program on remembering the 1975 New Haven teachers' strike, a turning point in history where 90 teachers were jailed. So we're here at an historic moment. 50 years after the strike, that was a monumental event for the city of New Haven. The strike moved people and created deep emotions, passions, and divisions. Before we begin, and this committee has tried to contact every single former striker and notify all the teachers that participated in the strike. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment of silence for the participants of the strike that are no longer with us. Thank you. For me, professionally, the strike was transforming. I was a young teacher, but participated in helping organize people. That was professionally. Personally, I met my wife during the strike 50 years ago, and we're still together. That's my wife over there. So a little, so I have 4 lessons from the strike that come to mind that made it successful. Number 1, having a committed membership of teachers. New Haven teachers at that time were among the lowest paid in the state. They also had some of the highest class sizes in the state. A lot of people attribute that to Yale, why our salaries are low. It was much discussed during that strike. Out of the major urban centers in the state of Connecticut, New Haven had the lowest pay. And a lot of people attributed that to the number 1 employer, Yale, had low salaries. So somebody working as a secretary over at Yale got a low, that determined the wage scale in New Haven. And a secretary working for the New Haven Public Schools got a low scale. So we were starting from the place of low pay, high class size, and during our negotiations. So the other point, number 2, I wanted to make, there's a key difference, and this applies to lessons for now, between mobilization and organization. And I've read about it a lot in labor history and labor organizing. Okay, it's fundamental. A mobilization, and we've had a lot of those against Trump, is a short-term strategy. That only gets you so far. You have to have a long-term strategy, and we had one with the strike. Let me give you an example. So I was a member of the communications committee, and we started negotiating a full year ahead of the strike. When the 12 teachers from the negotiation team, and then later the 78 teachers were jailed, we had a backup. That committee became the strike committee and ran the strike. So Carrano's in jail. What do you do in jail? You try and get the word out. So we took over from the communications committee to the strike committee. We didn't know they were going to be jails, but that was a organizational structural strategy which made the strike successful. And so in the leadership of that, I have to point out, and I want to give credit to Alice Mick. She was one of the leaders of the communications committee, strike committee. The other one who is no longer with us is Matt Bornstein, who then became, after Frank was jailed, a spokesperson for the union when Frank couldn't speak. The third lesson that I got from the strike was reaching out to the community and getting citywide union support. We had a lot of support from the unions and from the community in general. To this day, many of you don't know, but it's part of our labor history here in New Haven. There was an inspirational labor organizer named Vinnie Sarabella. He was the head of the Central Labor Council, and he organized all the unions in support in the city of New Haven in support of the teachers when 90 teachers were locked up. One memory I have that I'll never forget is Vinnie getting up at the Forest Theater, and that's where we had all of our get-togethers at the Forest Theater, and saying that he was organizing a general strike. This was deep into the strike. The strike was 2 weeks long. We're already 3/4 through it when Vinnie Sarabella gets up at the Forest Theater and threatens a general strike. That's what made the movement in negotiations. So he had behind him 30,000 union workers. And he gets up there, and this is the part I'll never forget. He says, "We're going to shut this city down." It still sends shivers up my spine to hear Vinny say that. It was so powerful. That was a moment I'll never forget. And he had the juice. He had the power behind him, and that moved the negotiations along. So lastly, the last lesson I learned, and I learned it again organizing this event, is that I learned that, and many organizers have referred to this, I learned that 90% of organizing is follow-up. Very simple thing that people forget. You have to remind people over and over and over again. So that was my last lesson. So now we're going to shift and go into the slideshow. But for you to understand the slideshow fully, I want to give you a little backgrounds and a little calendar about the strike. So negotiations began in 1974. The strike was 1975, November 10th to November 24th, a 2-week period. A full year before we're negotiating, November of 1974. So the Board of Education at that point lays off 140 first-year teachers in March of 74. Negotiations, November 74, March of 74, lays off 140 teachers without a fair hearing. We protested, we took it to court, they still didn't get their hearing. The following month, April of 1975, the Finance Committee cuts, quote unquote, a bare bones budget. So the Board of Education submitted a bare bones budget. The Finance Committee cuts the bare bones budget. Those were the conditions leading up to the strike. School opens September of 1975. Teachers are working without a contract. They've been in negotiations since November. The strike begins. So it ran for the 2 weeks, November 10th to November 24th. November 9th, teachers reject the board's last offer, which was no wage increase in the first year. They didn't budget for it. No wage increase in the first year, no change in class size. At that time, class size was around 32. We were trying to bring it down to 26. November 10th, 950 out of 1150 teachers do not show up for work, and the strike is on. An injunction was issued by the courts to stop the strike by Judge Satan. The teachers called him Judge Satan. That's what everybody called him. The Board of Education, this is their mentality. They wanted the harshest penalties for the teachers because the strike was illegal. They wanted the harshest penalties, and they hired a union-busting law firm. November 14th, a day that will live in infamy. The NHFT was held in contempt, ordered to stop the strike. The union refuses. 12 teachers of the negotiation team were jailed. They were sent to Bridgeport, the men. The women were sent to Niantic. At one point, and Frank may tell you some behind-the-scenes stories, the negotiators, even though they were jailed, I think they were let out for a weekend to continue to start negotiations again, and then they stalled, and then they were put back in jail. Then 78 teachers, for a total of 90 teachers, were in jails. And then you'll see some clips of Vinnie Sarabella threatens the general strike. Okay, so we're ready to start the slideshow. 10 minutes.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here to celebrate this occasion. And see if I can get this device working. So, Steve gave you a really good chronology of the strike, and he detailed all of the highlights of when we started negotiating, which was a full year before the strike. And all our efforts to reach a settlement, were constantly being rejected by the Board of Education. And then all of those individual situations. But what I wanted to focus on really is what made this strike so important is not just all of the individual pieces of it, but also the fact that when you ask a teacher to go on strike, you're asking that person, to do something that's illegal. And so it creates a whole different set of circumstances that people have to wrestle with. So 50 years ago, a lot of teachers were still dealing with how they could identify themselves as workers and professionals. So people had been told over and over again, become a teacher, you'll live in genteel poverty, but but the community you'll be beloved by the community. And it was sort of how people approached teaching, that the expectations were very low. When my wife, who started teaching the same year that I did, but when she got pregnant with her first child, she had to quit her job. And that was in the late 60s, because teachers could not be pregnant in a classroom. And as you may probably recall, most of your teachers, when you were in elementary school, were not married, because there was a time when teachers couldn't teach if they were married. So there's this whole history that teachers accepted and grew familiar with, which was that if you become a teacher, there are limitations as to what you can expect to get back, except for the fact that you have these wonderful experiences in your classrooms with the students. And so teachers 50 years ago, a lot of them were still wrestling with that, still trying to, balance out, how can I still be true to my profession and the kids that I love and I want to work with, and also be true to my responsibility, to get a decent wage and to create situations in school that work for everybody. And so one way, we did that was by balancing wages and class size, by balancing issues that not only affected teachers economically, but also students educationally. And I used to say to people, when you improve teachers' working conditions, you improve students' learning conditions. And, they're connected. And so the challenge that we had 50 years ago was to get those people to make that transition and to believe that if they did something like go out and strike, leave their classrooms, leave their students there and walk out, that it would not be a terrible thing. And that in the end, what they were doing was going to make things better for everybody. And so the fact that the union, for the first time, had such a well organized preparatory program in place with Alice and Steve and Matt and others who created the communication committee and the strike committee. When the time came that we had to ask those teachers at the Forest Theater, we're recommending that we go out on strike. Are you willing to do that? and true, we sing solidarity together, but we also quoted Thoreau. And we talked about the fact that sometimes, you have to do things for the betterment of society and mankind. And so it was important for teachers to feel that what they were doing had a bigger purpose. And it wasn't just, to get a few dollars more in their paycheck at the end of the week. And I think that the success that we had with the people who put so much time and energy into that preparation is what gave us that amazing outcome on the first day of the strike, as Steve said, when 950 teachers stayed home. None of us knew what was going to happen on that day. And I remember going around to different schools, because there were some schools that had more teachers in than others, mainly in the elementary schools. And, you have a generation of older teachers at the tail end of their career who were still of a mindset, that this is how a teacher needed to behave and this is how a teacher needed to be. But the fact that that even happened was astounding. But as we celebrated that success of the strike, we also knew that we were going to almost immediately be having to deal with the Board of Education, who was determined to break the union and to drag teachers down into a subservient position. And so all throughout negotiations, even reasonable items that we were putting on the table were rejected out of hand. It was a determined effort to push people back, push teachers back, so that when this was all over, we would end up with less than we had when we started. And so it's in the context of all of that, by the second day of the strike, I knew that I was going to go to jail, because I knew where the board was going to go with this. So the previous strike, when that Board of Education sought an injunction, there's a phone here somewhere. It's ringing. It's my phone. Yeah, I just want to turn it off. I'm sorry. And they went to court. The judge, rather than impose fines on them, the judge mediated a settlement. And the judge was part of the solution to the problem. But when we knew that when we went to court this time, as Steve said, and I think you saw in one of those pieces on the screen, the board wanted the harshest and most severe punishment for the teachers. So I knew that, I was prepared to do that, but we had 13 people on the negotiating committee, and I had to know that they were prepared to do that. And so, a couple of days into the strike, I called a meeting and we got together and we had a very thorough conversation about what our choices would be. And I said to him, you really only have two choices. We're going to be called into court, and one choice is for you to say, okay, we'll go back to work. And the other choice for you is to say we won't. And so after we went through a conversation and I polled all 13 of us. One of them said she couldn't do it. She said, I can't in my heart do this. And so the negotiating committee became 12 people, because she just didn't have the heart to do it. And we didn't hold it against her. We didn't chastise her. We just understood that that was a personal issue for her. So the day that we went to court, well, let me back up. So there's still all this, your mind is like wondering, is this really what we should be doing? And I remember I was at the union office the day before we were going to go to Superior Court. 1404 Willie Avenue on the second floor above the pizza joint. And someone came through the door, and it was my third grade teacher, Miss Gitlitz, Ruth Gitlitz. And I hadn't seen her since third grade. And she had come there to tell me how proud she was of what we were doing. Now, Miss Gitlitz, Miss Gitlitz was a woman of her time, a very fine, very quiet lady. And when I saw her walk through the door, I was really very emotional touched by that. And then I thought, well, if Miss Gitlitz thinks we're doing the right thing, we must be doing the right thing. So when we went to court, we were ready. We knew what the judge was really, really harsh. He wanted us to purge ourselves of the sin, I guess, of having broken the law. And he kept pointing his finger and saying to me, especially you, get your people back to work. And I said, this is a union. Like, I don't say to them, you have to go back to work tomorrow. That's their decision to make. So anyway, we went from that court. They put us in a van, and they took us to the New Haven jail. And, the New Haven jail at that time had a bad reputation as, not being, well, nobody wants to go to jail, but in particular, the New Haven jail right on Willie Avenue, the Willie Avenue jail, had a reputation as being, a very unpleasant place to be. And I was concerned. I was concerned about the women going to Niantic, which is a high security prison. I was concerned about the indignity that people would be subjected to as they were processed. As prisoners, all prisoners are processed. And when we got to the New Haven jail, after maybe 15 minutes, one of the guards came up to me and he said, I just want you to know that Dominic Bottolato is sending you his best wishes. And Dominic Bottolato was the executive director of AFSCME. And all of those guards were members of AFSCME. And so that message meant a lot to me. Because we didn't know how we were going to be received in jail. We didn't know whether they would, think that we were, what are you doing here anyway? We don't want you here or whatever. It was an unknown. And getting that message, really created a sense of security. But within, 30 minutes of our going to New Haven jail, because there were already teachers outside picketing and whatever, the city said we had to be moved. They didn't want us in New Haven, so they brought us to Bridgeport. And in Bridgeport, was a high security institution, barbed wire fence all around it, and not at all close to the streets. So we couldn't see anything going on outside of our windows. And because we were in civil contempt of court and not criminals, we had to be separated in jail. And so they put us in a separate cell block. And we remained there for all the time we were in jail. We never left it. We never went outdoors. We just stayed in that area. We ate our meals there. And every night at 10:30, we went to our cells and they locked the door. So it was, and meanwhile, all of this stuff was going on outside, and we're trying to understand it. And our only outlet was, Channel 8 News at 6 and in the morning. So we would, wait to see what was going on TV. I would get messages, and at 6 o'clock every night, they would take me to the warden's office, and I could take a phone call from Matt or someone from New Haven teachers who were involved in the negotiations. When we heard about the 78 teachers, it was, we were stunned by that. And then when we looked down the list and we saw the people who were there, some of them, it wasn't that surprising, but others were people that I never would have expected to do what they did because, they were like reticent union members. They were not active and they were not people who participated that much in union activities. But when they were offered that option to either, go back to work when they got that subpoena or get on that bus and go to Camp Bartel, they went to Camp Bartel. So the whole process was, I think, something that created for teachers themselves a new outlook on what it means to be a teacher. And I think it helped redefine the definition of a modern teacher. It's okay for you to feel as though you're entitled to certain things, and it's okay for you to fight for what you think you need because you're not going to get it any other way. And I think for me that was always sort of the empowerment of teachers was, I think, the most important outcome of the strike. The fact that unions also came together and for a moment, they recognized the power that they had working together to create something bigger than themselves. Um, and the fact that even within the community, the Black Coalition, for instance, which organized around the strike, which was a coalition of religious groups and parents and community people. I think it gave them it was a precursor of what was to come later when people realize that if you don't fight for what you need and want and don't fight for what's good for the world, it'll never happen. And so I think all of those were, for me, takeaways, um, and elevated the strike to a level of importance beyond the settling of a contract. So in the end, the contract settlement wasn't the most important thing. In the end, it was how people were able to stand up for themselves, fight for the kids, try to create a better place for everybody. And that's what made it so important. And even 50 years later, when you look at that, when you look at the screen and how even the press began to change its attitude over the course of those days, first saying, "What do you want strike for?" And then saying, like the teachers are doing something here. And without saying it, my friend Ed is a reporter, and he probably would appreciate that more than any of the rest of us to see how the evolution of Bob Greenlee's articles as they came up. Um, and so, in spite of the fact that as we were getting ready to leave the Bridgeport jail, one of the one of the guards came up to me and said, "I want you to really think about leaving today because we're going to have a hell of a meal for Thanksgiving." And I thanked him very much, but I said I thought we wanted to spend Thanksgiving at home with our families. So it was it was an amazing experience. I appreciate the fact that 50 years later we're spending a little time uh, thinking about it and talking about it, appreciating it, and what it accomplished for a lot of people, even people who are not teachers or in education. I think there were important lessons learned from what people did, and I'm grateful that I had a small role to play in that, and I'll forever be grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That was great. I really enjoyed that. It brought back a lot of memories. How powerful the strike was and what a transforming experience. That was really the bottom line, for all the people that were involved. it totally transformed me and made me, an activist. And had I not had that experience, I think I would have been a very different person. Um, so we're at the point in the program uh, where I want to present the Augusta Lewis Troop Pass It On Award. So Augusta Lewis Troop, Gussie, she lived to 1848 to 1920, was a women's right activist and journalist who advocated for equal pay, uh, better working conditions for women, and women's right to vote. In 1868, Augusta Lewis founded the Topographical Union in New York City. She organized a women's labor union, allowing her to champion efforts to advocate for better working conditions and pay. Augusta Lewis married Alexander Troop. In their day, they were the power couple of New Haven. Alexander Troop was a well-known labor leader. In fact, I want to do some research. They put out a newspaper called the New Haven Union, and they have some of those archives in the New Haven Museum, and I'd like to uncover that. So it was a pro-woman suffrage newspaper dedicated to union organization and the rights of women and other minorities. Augusta Lewis began to teach in the New Haven public schools and joined the Board of Ed to advocate for teacher rights. She established the New Haven Teacher League in 1911 and lobbied for state-provided pensions for public school teachers. Troop School in New Haven is named to honor her, the only teacher in New Haven. So we call it the Pass It On. We call it the Pass It On Award. And this year's recipient is Frank Carrano. Why don't you come up there? I work with Frank a lot. Over those 25 years that he was union president. And during the 1975 teacher strike, his leadership guided teachers in making tremendous strides and gaining respect for the educational community here in New Haven. So I want to present this to Frank Carrano, and it's written right on the plaque. For his meritorious contributions to New Haven and Connecticut labor movement for over 25 years.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. It's a particular pleasure to get this from Steve, my old friend and colleague. I am so proud of the time I spent working with unions and the people that I met and got to know as members of labor unions. People whose idealism always impressed me, because in their own little way, however small it may have been, they had this vision of making the world better for everyone. Through the solidarity of a union or through the combined efforts that you can do union with union to improve things. So I grew up just over the bridge here in a Italian neighborhood called Worcester Square. And the neighborhood I grew up in was dotted with factories, many of which were shirt and dress shops. Mostly women worked there. two of my oldest sisters worked in a factory making shirts, and they worked peacetime. So you had to make as many cuffs as you could in a day, or as many collars as you could in a day, or put as many buttonholes in the flap of the shirt in a day in order to get a decent wage. And it wasn't until the ILGWU convinced those women that they could do better with a union, that they were able to make some inroads. So even back to my childhood, watching those women go to work every day, we had a market, and very often they would come at noontime and buy the food they were going to cook for supper that night, and we would hold it for them in the store, and then they would come out of work tired, grab the bags, and go home and make supper. So it gave me an early appreciation of the importance of unions, and when I got old enough to join a union with the teachers, I had an opportunity to try to work through some of those issues myself. So I really appreciate this. It's very meaningful to me, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Uh, for our second award, it's going to be made to the New Haven Federation of Teachers as a community organization, and Nancy Charest is going to present it to the present president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers, and to one of the Linda Powell, Leslie Plateau, and Linda Powell will be recipients.
Get booked, okay? Thank you, Daisy.
This acknowledgement, can you see me over the podium? Shrinking on a daily basis. This acknowledgement is for all New Haven teachers, past, present, and future. With special acknowledgement to those who courageously participated in the 1975 strike 50 years ago, the 90 who went to jail, the organizing team, and the 1,200 teachers who were out on strike, many of them walking picket lines. May this, John Lewis said that good trouble is necessary trouble. Good trouble is about dramatizing something that needs a changing or correcting. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to say something. You have to do something. You have to push and pull and be prepared to make a little noise. Speak up. Speak out. Be courageous. Whatever good work you do, whatever peaceful, profound work you do, be powerful and do it because it's right and because it's necessary. Do it to make change for the better. Do it because you know you must. May this 50th year anniversary be a time of reflection and inspiration to carry on the good work of this union. And may it honor all the union teachers, past, present, and future, of the New Haven Federation of Teachers, Local 933.
Hey, today, we're okay.
And I asked Linda to stand with me because she was one of the jail teachers.
Yes.
And there are several here today. And the plaque reads, to the New Haven Federation of Teachers for their courage, commitment, and solidarity during the 1975 teacher strike to improve the New Haven educational community and teachers' working conditions. Pass it on.
Atu. Thank you, Ritin.
This is really incredible to be with you all here this afternoon, and on behalf of our membership, past, present, and future, to receive this. I'm a history teacher, and every time I dig into the archives or hear from folks who are part of this strike or have studied this strike, I learn more about the strike, and I'm so grateful. We truly have inherited a radical legacy from the union members who came before us, many of whom are here in this room with us, and current union members who are in this room with us. And we are, in organizing, we don't say thank you, right? So we don't want to say thank you, but we will say and recognize how incredible, what an incredible impact you all had on us. And we can't help but notice how far we've come, certainly, but more importantly, how so much of what you were fighting for, we continue to fight for today. So we know, a lot of New Haven teachers today, it costs them money to do their job, right? Same as you, we're paying out of our pocket for supplies. Our health insurance costs are too high. We often work for free because we care so much about making sure that our classrooms are in the condition that we know our students deserve. So we still have a great deal of work to do, and we will bargain our next contract starting on September 30th in this room. So please stay tuned for that, because we're going to need continued community support, because there are real lessons here. And I always remark, the more I think about New Haven, the more I fall in love with New Haven, because things start here. So when my team and our team, when we ran for union leadership, we were looking to the Chicago Teachers Union as an inspiration for us, as a radical fighting union who was fighting not just for teachers, but for kids and communities. And we looked to them to inspire us in our work. But little did we know, we didn't have to look to Chicago. Because in 2014, an organization formed called Bargaining for the Common Good. And bargaining for the common good is a principle that guides the work of unions like Chicago and LA and Boston, where, as Frank said, our working conditions are students' learning conditions, where the fight and the community is not just for teachers, but it's for everybody. So this idea, started in 2014, bargaining for the common good, but in reality, the New Haven Federation of Teachers was bargaining for the common good in the 1970s, and you knew how to do it. You knew that you needed community on your side. You knew that fighting for class size and for resources and for teacher voice mattered. And you knew that people really do love teachers. The people love teachers. The authority figures maybe not so much. And the parallels continue to run through today. And you knew, just to close up, that solidarity is what ultimately is going to help us win. And that's a lesson, when we see, let's bring it back to Chicago, when we see that Donald Trump is getting ready to send federal troops to the city of Chicago, when they don't want them there, we know that solidarity is going to matter for us more than ever before. So I'm excited to sing with you all later in this. And again, just so incredibly inspired. We're going to do our best to try to come close to what you all did. We do have a shorter bargaining session as a result of the Teacher Negotiation Act that resulted from your bravery. So we've got 6 weeks to deliver a teacher contract that's going to help keep our teachers here and make sure that our students have the world-class education that we know they all deserve. So shout out to the strikers, to the New Haven 90, and to the brave 1200 who stood the line. And may we follow in your footsteps and learn from you every day. Thank you. Thank you. Ingras.
So now we're going to have participants that from the strike give their perspective. Each one of them will have time to give their perspective. And then afterwards, we'll have questions and answers.
I believe I'm the only person on this panel who hasn't gone to jail. Yet. However, I know I'm in the presence of courageous people who got into some good trouble. That and the fact that I'd be the youngest person on this panel convinced me to join. These days, I'm not often the youngest in a group. Being the youngest does give me a teaching career lasting 30-plus years after the strike as an active unionist. It changed my life. I have a unique perspective, and I have a legacy from that strike. The impact of the strikes of 1973 and 1975 were profound on me, and I am part of your legacy. I began my teaching career in the 1971-72 school year with great expectations. I had worked hard to put myself through university with no financial or family support. So in 1973, when the union called a strike, I had no idea what that was about, other than that I might lose my job. The night before the strike, Florence Leventhal, whose picture is over by the drinks table and was on the screen, she was the building steward for Davis School, and she called me and said, "So are you going in tomorrow?" I said I didn't know. I didn't know anyone who had ever been on strike. "I'll make it simple," Florence said. "If you go in, we'll take you up to the top of Davis School and drop you off." It's true. I didn't go in. Instead, I joined the picket line. And that afternoon, after picketing, Florence brought me to her house for some delicious Jewish chicken soup and buttered toast. She did not convert me to Judaism, but she did convert me to unionism. I did not lose my job, but I did lose my position at Davis School with an involuntary transfer. In 1975, I was on the picket lines every day. I went to the rallies at the Forest Theater, where Alice Mick, who had long hair and a loud voice, and Big Ernie fired us up, and the communications committee kept us informed. I was on the sidewalk of Cross High School when teachers were loaded onto the buses to go to the prisons. We cried. I think you all should know the profound effect the strikes had subsequently on me. I became a building steward in the 1970s and went on to join the executive board. I became the vice president of the elementary teachers and the executive vice president of NHFT, serving with Frank Carrano and Matt Bornstein. My union life was informed by my friendship with unionists like Mary Johnson, Ruth Schwartz, and all of you. In 1994, I founded the retiree chapter of the New Haven Federation of Teachers and currently serve as its president. Look what you started. I am a part of your legacy. If you ask if the strike made a difference, it did, nationally and personally. And I suggest to President Leslie Blatchot that chicken soup and buttered toast be served at all future stewards meetings.
Well, I am really happy to be here today. This is a wonderful reunion. And when Steve Cass called me and asked if I would come, I thought, Oh, wow, that was 50 years ago. I don't know if I can remember. But then I realized this is why we do this, because it's so important for us to remember in order to go forward. And I am particularly, I didn't come with prepared remarks, but I want to say that I really understand why Frank Carrano was the president of our teachers union during that 1975 strike. For some of us who were kind of firebrands, maybe, sometimes we thought, well, Frank, he's more conservative, but he wasn't at all more conservative. He was wider in his perspective, and I think his remarks today really bring that home again, that you have to have both sides of a movement, and that is you have to have people who think about the future and think about the past and can be together in the present. And I think, Frank, you were an amazing example of that, and still are. So thank you again. And I wanted to also say that a short period of time can make a big difference. I started teaching in 1969 at Hill House High School. And I just thought that was the best thing in the whole world. I was teaching French. I mean, talk about a somewhat irrelevant subject at the time. But it was a great thing to do, and it was a lot of fun. And I remember, and the students were very active, and I remember looking out my window one day and seeing a teacher on top of a table, sliding down the hall towards the second floor window, being pushed by students. And I thought, wow, we're in the middle of it. So, so when someone asked me the next year if I'd like to help start a school, I really was not sure. I thought I couldn't be more happy where I am. But George Foote talked me into it, and along with 10 other teachers, and we started a high school in the community. And that was 10 teachers and 150 students. And we had a good time. We had a really good time. But the very first day of the first year of that school was September something or August something, 1970. And guess what happened then? There was a teacher's strike. And on that day, because people who were helping to start the school cared so much that the school be successful, I was the only teacher who went on strike in that school. So I had a picket line of 1 in front of our former car dealership on Goff Street. But a lot of people from the New Haven Labor Council came and picketed with me. And we didn't stop talking to the people who did go in that day, go into school, and we kept working together. And 5 years later, in 1975, when we had the strike that we're celebrating today, all but one teacher went out, and the people in that school were a lot of the people who helped organize the people while the negotiating team was in jail. And we learned a lot from that, and among other things, we learned that it's really, and other people have said it today, it's really important to get organized in advance. And it's really important to build from the grassroots up. And you end up that way with people who will stay strong even if there's a lot to lose, because they realize that the strength and solidarity is really what holds us all together. And this is a wonderful place, and Steve, I think it's great that you're doing this, and I bet every single one of you were on strike back then in 1975, either at a school or perhaps in another union who was supportive, or maybe now I've met some young women who are studying the labor movement and studying history of the labor movement. So I just think that we're part of a big history, and I'm really proud to be one of all of you.
Good afternoon. I would like to start my little speech by asking you to just imagine that you were in the courthouse listening to Judge Satan. And this is how he started his message. I wish, therefore, to speak to you mainly on the vital proposition of rights and responsibilities, and some of the most important things for you to remember. Today, even the most illiterate person on the street can spout off to you in a moment about his rights. But if you ask that same person about his responsibilities, he cannot say a word. In 1953, James Conant, who was then the president of Harvard, described the purpose of education as the cultivation in our future citizens. And that was an important message. But then in the end, Albert Wiggins in 1923 decided that the thing that is most important about education is that education that may well be in point, he remarked, intelligence appears to be the thing that enables a man to get along without an education. But an education appears to be the thing that enables a man to get along without the use of his intelligence. When Judge Satan spoke to us always in a negative way, it didn't encourage us or feel like we were appreciated for what we were trying to do. And so most of us knew that on this day we were not coming back home to our families. For me, for example, I was the mother of 2 young girls and a husband, and I didn't know if I should go or just, stay at home. But I've always been a person who wanted to carry my weight, which my husband reminded me wasn't too much, for any situation that I would be the benefit of whatever the outcome would be. And then I started to think about why I became a teacher. And I had a little plaque that was right in front of me every time the alarm clock went off. And so it was short in message. It said that a teacher, as far as a student, takes a hand, warms a heart, and keep the knowledge in that person forever. So when I read that, I knew I would have to get up, get ready, and start another day. I fortunately have been able to teach for 45 years, first starting at Central High School in Bridgeport, which was the second largest enrollment of students in the state of Connecticut at that time. And then I went on to teach at Bassick High School for 1 year, and that's also in Bridgeport. And then I got a call from New Haven. Everything just sounds so perfect. Oh yeah, everything, it will be fine. So for New Haven, in all total, 41 years. So I have a total of 45 years in teaching. But teachers, they don't think about just what do I gain from it, whether it's the salary, the hours, is it going to be a convenient job for me. They think about the outcome of the future. What am I trying to do in that classroom that will influence teachers and also the students that you're teaching to look up to a better opportunity in life. I would also like to share with you something from the from the courtesy of the New Hampshire Historical Society. And it was in 1872, Rules for Teachers. This was very exciting. This was the work of a teacher back then. Teachers each day will oil the lamps and clean the chimneys. Each teacher will bring a bucket of water and a scuttle of coal for the day's session. Make your pens carefully. You may whittle the nibs to the individual's taste for the pupil. Men teachers may take one evening each week for courting purposes, or 2 evenings if they go to church regularly. After 10 hours in school, the teacher may open the Bible to read or another interesting book. Women teachers who marry or engage in unseemly conduct will be dismissed. Every teacher should lay aside from each pay period a goodly sum of the earnings that they have to benefit the declining years so that you won't be a burden to society. Any teacher who smokes, uses liquor in any form, frequent pool or public places, or gets shaved in a barber shop, you run the risk of your job because it doesn't look like you have good intentions. The teacher who performs his labor faithfully and without fault for 5 years will be given an increase of his salary of 25 cents a week, so he won't be a burden to society. You may ride in a buggy if you are female, if the person in the buggy is your father or your brother. This came from the courtesy of New Hampshire Historical Society. I have certainly enjoyed each year of my career as a teacher, and I think that all of you here feel the same way. We have so much to give, we've given so much, and we will continue to do that until we leave this earth. Thank you.
Well, I have a totally different perspective on this than most people. I grew up in a union house, so there was no way I wasn't going to go to jail. I knew that. But I have never been prouder of anything I've done. And I know this sounds gratuitous, but I was a very good teacher. I broke a lot of rules, which I think is necessary if you're going to be a good teacher. And without the union, I wouldn't have lasted 35 years. I have to thank Frank Carrano for saving my job more than once. So breaking the rules was not a big deal for me. But I have never been prouder than anything than going to jail for what I believed in and being part of this group who went to jail for what they believed in. I told my kids when I was teaching, and that's another thing. I don't call them students. They were my kids. They weren't students. They weren't somebody. They were our kids. So I told my kids that you have to, if you believe in something, you have to be willing to fight for it. And if you're going to fight for it, you have to be willing to pay whatever price is exacted for that fight. And so going to jail was just part of the routine. We had to fight for what we believed, and we had to pay the price. And I never regretted that once. But I want to get now before, during, and after the strike. Before the strike, our students all knew that the strike was coming. All the other teachers knew that the strike was coming. So it was common to talk about it. In fact, you couldn't help talk about it in class because that's all the kids wanted to talk about. And then the other teachers that could not support the strike, they needed to talk about it too. So talking together was extremely important. And once you tell someone what you think and what you believe, then you have to stand up for that. And again, my students were going, if I didn't go out and believe and back up what I said I was going to do, I would have lost my students. And I couldn't afford to do that. So I knew I was going to jail. There was no doubt about it. And coming back from jail, it was important to make peace with those people that did not go to jail, because there was the opportunity to have chaos amongst the staff, because some people wanted retribution. There was no retribution. People did what they believed in, and they paid whatever price they had to be able to express what they believed and then follow through on what they believed. And that's what this is all about, being in the union, fighting for what you believe in. And you have a very big fight coming, because we have, with binding arbitration, you're going to have to break the law again. I don't think there's any way around it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Linda Powell, and I too began teaching in New Haven in 1971-72 school year at Lee High School. And like Rich and many other people here, it was not enough to teach students lessons like from Walden on civil disobedience. We had to walk the walk. We couldn't just teach the lessons and have them read about these things. It was important for them to see us standing up for what we believed in. So I had a lot of fun, and I want to thank Pam Monk Kelly, who was a former student of mine, at Lee, for inviting me to be part of the planning committee. And we had so much fun. It allowed me to reach out to contact many people. We were trying to reach all 90, and of course, you know, that wasn't possible with some of us leaving early. But I did talk to Peter Herndon, who was planning to be here and couldn't, and he shared with me something that I didn't know he had, and that was a diary from the 1975 teachers' strike. He called it the so-called class of 78. On 11/17, we were assigned to a barracks. His happened to be number 6. He was given a number, a prisoner number. He was given a room number, and he was assigned his roommate, Red McDonough. I remember, too, that when we were checked in, they gave us a little brown bag, a paper bag with a comb in it, a toothbrush, toothpaste, and a pack of cigarettes. This is what I think most prisoners must have gotten. I just assume that's what everybody got when they were processed. So we settled in, and that afternoon, Shirley and Ernie Adinolfi went to the kitchen because we didn't have any cooks. They weren't ready for us. So Shirley and Ernie and Gladys Whitney went into the kitchen, found some cans, found can openers, opened up whatever they could find, and cooked us dinner. And it was delicious. It was
Canned ham, green beans, and mashed potatoes.
our first meal. And the next day, Peter was very spiritual and also very funny. So I always loved being in his class. He had a great sense of humor. I never came out of his class where I didn't at least have a good smile. So the second day, on 11/18, he was reading his Bible in the morning, and it was from the book of James, chapter 3, verse 1. And I quote, "Let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. If only I had known that in advance. On Wednesday, Principal Bob Schreck locked out all the teachers who had purged themselves on the courtroom steps and others, and we all felt like this guy has guts. He received a one-day suspension from Superintendent Barbarito, but then he was reinstated. Schools will be closed then Thursday and Friday, and negotiations will resume. We were so heartened by that. We received a dozen red roses from the Lee High School administrators. The men serenaded the women. We all were like, thanks, fellas. We really needed that lift. And Bob Schreck called, and so he kept in touch with many of the people. One of the women I was with was the sole caretaker for her 89-year-old mother, so he made sure somebody was there. He made sure that the women with very small 3-month-old babies and young children had someone to take care of their families. So that was very important to us. It was, made us feel great. So we decided we had to start doing things to make us feel better, lift our spirits, and so somebody asked us for ideas for telegrams to Mayor Frank Logue. So these are some of the quotes. "We appreciate your clear stand on our cause," from Frank Caparulo. "All is well at Hartwell, sleep well." "As an incarcerated teacher, your unstinting efforts on our behalf underwhelm us," Ruth Schwartz. "Jail ain't so bad when you know your friends care." "A just settlement or just a settlement," Sonny Sachs. "Wondering what prison Thanksgiving turkey tastes like? We may find out," from Ernie Adnolfi. And from Lula White, who, by the way, had a great deal of experience as a freedom rider and was jailed in the South for that. Her quote was for the telegram, "Sorry we missed your flight from Puerto Rico. We were unavailable for comments." We played volleyball. We did a lot of things to kind of, make everybody feel well. Gladys Whitney fell down. Joni Repchinski landed on her head, and Bob Burrell called it a rear-on-head collision. We watched the movie Future Shock with hitchhikers holding a sign that said, "Anywhere but here," and of course that got a big laugh. We were so heartened when pickets appeared at the gates outside of Camp Hartel. "Jail the judge, let my people go." We knew they were there. We planned a talent show entitled "The Times They Are Changin'," the Bob Dylan song. And they made up a song, and I think this was where Don Prue came in, and Laurel Billings, Laurel and Don, right. Laurel Billings, you can't forget her doing her Do the Purge dance in front of everybody, because that was the lesson from Judge Sadin. You need to purge yourself. So she did the purge, and the songs were "Give My Regards to Judge Sadin," "Tell Him He's a Hell of a Guy," "If You Should Chance to Stop by Purgatory, Give Him One Right in the Eye," "Whisper How I'm Burning to Purge Myself of All My Sin, Give My Regards to Satan, and Tell Him I'll Be Staying In." So we did a bunch of things like that to feel better. The other thing was we decided we would leave a little something to Judge Sadin. His inability to comprehend contempt for our inability to comprehend contempt for educators, or an understanding of social justice. Lula wanted to leave him a copy of the Letters from a Birmingham Jail by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a copy of Civil Disobedience. Lynn Spishiger said that was especially important to her as something that she taught to her students. And picket signs, "Negotiate, don't incarcerate." Our principal and vice principal brought our paychecks to us. One of the last days the lawyers came in, it was dead silence, not a single applause. The lawyers made a comment that night that said they had met better boards in a wood shop. They discussed progress as being class size at 31, pay increments at 200 per year. And then Frank Carrano told us incarcerated people get the first crack at voting for a new contract, and that's when all the applause broke out. They were proposing a class size of 30 times 5, that's 150 students a day for high school students. Peter Herndon did a little quick math and came up with this formula of 5 minutes. If you spent 5 minutes on one student paper a week, times 130, that's 11.8 hours. If you just spend 5 minutes on one student assignment. So, you know, these were impossible statistics, you know, to spend time in a class with 30 kids, giving every kid a chance to be part of the lesson. We resolved that our lawyers weren't worth the paper their contract was written on, no compromise. John Clark said we just have to tough it out. And we got a letter from North Haven teachers, one of whom had been a teacher at Lee High School, just, you know, telling us how much they appreciated what we did. Steve Jennings, for however long it takes to reach a just settlement with your kids and yourselves, we're with you. And it just made a lot of, it helped us a lot. All those activities and all those means of support were really kept us going. And then the last, the Camp Hartel 10 Commandments: thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's physical freedom, thy neighbor's salary scale, or his class size, or her principal, or anything else that is your neighbor's. And that was it.
Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In the hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they know or toil to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single world can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Is there aught we hold in common with the greedy parasite who would lash us to earth and would crush us with his might? Is there anything left to do but to organize and fight? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Thank you. Thank you. And the last song I'm playing was written in 1901 by Charles Albert Tindley. We Shall Overcome, as a gospel tune, and it's become an anthem of resistance, which we need a lot of today. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Hand in hand, we walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. Now, in the tradition of labor unions, we make our own lyrics up sometimes. And this is a couple of verses that we made just for the strikers of 75. The strikers in 75, they kept hope alive. We do recall that strike in the fall. Oh, let us remember what happened that November. We shall not forget those days. Very good, very good. You guys stayed with it. We walked the picket lines. Here's an important line. We paid enormous fines. We had to be brave for respect to be paid. Oh, 90 went to jail, but but the Union did prevail. We shall not forget those days. Thank you, and you're good singers. I might have to employ you one of these days. All right. Thanks very much.